Welcome to the Aledo Bearcats Coaches Show podcast, a presentation of Real Country 92.1 Hank FM. Live from Boo Rays of New Orleans and Hudson Oaks, the Aledo Bearcats Coaches Show podcast is brought to you by H5 Sports Barn in Aledo and Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth. And now, with head coach Robby Jones, here's the voice of the Bearcats, Kevin Lonnquist.
Pistol formation. Play action, Beard to throw, sets up, fires down the field. He's got Birdville wide open at the 20-yard line. He's got it. 10-5, touchdown, Aledo Bearcats. 53 yards. Gavin Beard rolls the pocket to his left, has Birdville wide open, and the Bearcats stretch it out to 20-0. And the Bearcats were on their way to a homecoming victory over Birdville last Friday. We welcome you to the Aledo Coaches Show podcast here on 92.1 Hank FM. I'm Kevin Lonnquist. Thanks for joining us here. We are, of course, at this new location at Boo Rays of New Orleans in Hudson Oaks. Remember, they also have two other locations over in Lake Worth and Crowley. This podcast will run all the way through, at least for this part of the football season, through October 14th. That's the week when the Bearcats have their bye, and then we'll have the week off then. And then when we come back, we'll have, or I should say, we will resume the podcast. As always, we are brought to you by H5 Sports Barn and Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth. As we mentioned, the Bearcats winning 56-0 on homecoming over Birdville. They are now 3-1 for the season, 2-0 in District 3-5A. And a reminder that this week's game is going to be a Thursday 7 o'clock kickoff in Keller against the Fossil Ridge Panthers. The pregame show on Hank FM will be at 6:30. As always, we have on our first segment head coach Robby Jones. He'll break down this decisive victory for the Bearcats. And then in our second segment, we've got a good one with our defensive ends, Carson, Dempsey, and Cooper Cyphers. All right, Coach, let's get started with 56-0. And I think the things that stood out, I mean, this is back-to-back shutouts for you all to start the year in district play. And then, of course, you have the big play offense, which you saw it a couple times in the week against Brewer, but really standing out in this one against Birdville. What do you take away from just overall what you saw from that performance?
Yeah, overall it was a great performance by our kids. You know, defense once again got another shutout. Offensively, we kind of started a little slow. We punted a couple of times in the first half, which we don't like doing, but we did. We did get, some big plays, which was good to see. You know, that was something that we haven't had a whole lot of this year, but those big chunk plays, I know we had a long one to Birdville and then another long one to Finley. So, you know, we like seeing those big explosive plays.
Now, the deacon who's sitting over here glaring at me, and I wanted to make sure I got this in before I got into any other trouble with him, but he says that this back-to-back shutouts that Aledo has posted against Brewer and again against Birdville, first time that they've started district play with back-to-back shutouts since 1972. Now, the interesting thing about the two teams that these shutouts came against, think of the geography of this when this was in district play. You've got Boyd, which is way to the northwest of Fort Worth, and then you got Coppell, which is right over by DFW Airport. It kind of tells you where the dynamics were of the area. Of course, that was 52 years ago, but that's a hard thing to do. I mean, even throwing a shutout in any game against the opponent notwithstanding, that's a hard thing to do. And then to do it for back-to-back weeks really says something about what your group is doing defensively.
Yeah, not only is it the starters, but, you know, sometimes we give up those late touchdowns with our backups. And we were rotating a lot of kids in late in that game, and for those guys to preserve the shutout, it was a big deal for us.
Yeah, and the one thing about the end of that game was, you know, Birdville was trying to get down there. They were inside your red zone, and your defense bowed up and made us stop right there. I mean, and of course, they kind of stopped themselves. They kind of said, forget it, we're not running the last play, when they actually had an opportunity to do that. But still, when you see that, that kind of goes back to what the mentality is and the culture is of this program, that there's not that we're not going to be the ones that lets this to happen, regardless of what the subject is.
Right, and that's what those guys' goal was. You know, when they were out there to make a stop, and they were able to do it. We gave up several first downs. We didn't get to run as many offensive plays as we would like. I think after the game we realized we only ran 34 offensive plays.
That's crazy too, by the way.
Yeah, which, you know, you score 56 points, only run 34 plays. But, you know, the problem with that was, you know, late in the game when we were trying to get our backups in, we didn't get our offensive backups in very many plays.
Yeah, and I think you could only get them in the fourth quarter there just because the way the third quarter ran, it was kind of an interesting way. Of course, What helped, and of course unhurt, if you want to look at it in both ways, is the fact that Lincoln Tubbs returns the second half kickoff back for a touchdown. So that kind of takes your offense off the field and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Lincoln took the ball out of our hands, right away. And
Thanks, Lincoln. And
and then I believe we had 4 offensive snaps in the fourth quarter. So, it made it difficult for us to get those guys in like we would like to have done. But, the good thing is we got out of it, fairly healthy and got the victory.
Your junior quarterback, Gavin Beard, returns from what we call the hockey terminology of the upper body injury, 13 out of 14, 196 yards, 3 touchdowns. You can't get any better than that. What'd you think?
No, very efficient, and that's what we like about Gavin is the fact that he's going to put the ball on the receivers, and move the chains and do all the great things that all the great Aledo quarterbacks have done in the past.
I think the thing that struck me when I watched him, and Kyle Hicks and I were talking about this during the broadcast, was how mobile he was in terms of just being able to roll the pocket or just kind of move within the pocket. If you look at the 53-yard touchdown pass to Blake Burdine, the first audio clip that we had to start this podcast, that had to be encouraging to see that, because sometimes if you're dealing with an injury like he's dealing with, you're not sure about the mobility and if you can roll him out or if you can move him like that. Is he going to have to stay in the pocket, or how flexible can he be?
Yeah, no, he's mobile, and that was the thing. It was a play action where he was sprinting out to his left, which is, for a right-handed quarterback, that's one of the more difficult throws to make, is rolling out to your left. And we saw him do it all week in practice, and he's been pain-free and all those things. So, it's going to be an asset to us when he does get out and move around.
Okay, so the after effects of that, because when you play and you're dealing with what he's dealing with the day after, anything that you, medically speaking, that you all were concerned about or had to pay attention to, or how did he come through that?
No, I mean, he came in Saturday morning and felt fine. So, that was a great thing, and plus, he took an early hit, took an early sack. So, right. It was good to see that, he can, withstand a hit, and have no effects from it.
There just seemed to be in this game with him returning, and again, this is nothing against Nash McElroy, because what Nash has done in his 2 starts, yeoman's type work, but there just seemed to be this flow of this offense. Caden Finley, over 100 yards and 2 scores. And, of course, we saw the big vertical to Blake, which we talked about. And the running game just looks like where it needs to be, or getting to where it needs to be. What's your sense of where it's progressing at this time?
Yeah, and when you have your starting quarterback in there, that's the way it's supposed to look.
Right.
And we are getting better. One of the areas in which we are working on getting better week by week is with the offensive line. We got a brand new offensive line. Mm-hmm. And so those guys are progressing, and we see it, week to week in practice, that those guys are progressing and those guys are getting better. And the better offensive line gets, the better offense is going to be.
Which takes me to my next question here with the return of center Ryan Campbell. Just getting him back. Of course, he didn't play the previous week, but just getting him back and getting everybody reconfigured where they need to be. And he's in the middle of it all. So what does that mean for the continuity of it?
Oh, that's a big boost, to get him back. He's one of our better offensive linemen, and we have him, in there at that center position for a reason. He's very consistent with his snaps, and then also, we in the past few years, we faced a lot of odd fronts where we have a nose guard. So we wanted to make sure that we had somebody in there at that center spot that could handle a big nose guard, and he can do it. He's already shown that he could do that against, the very first opponent we had in Denton Geyer. So, it's a very important thing to have, that starting center in there, because he's the guy making all the line calls. When they go up to the center, you see our guys, they're up there communicating, and he's the main communicator. He's calling out what front he's seeing, and then everybody's making their line calls of, combos and things like that.
Do you have a preference on how you want your line to block? I've never even asked you this question about zone blocking or straight ahead. What's been kind of just the overall physicality over the years?
We are a zone team. Our number 1 offensive play is inside zone, and then we also run stretch as our number 2 play. But physicality is the main thing. We want those guys to be physical, and we want them to block to the echo. We could call it the echo of the whistle, which makes our defense mad in the spring, because they are going a little bit past the whistle sometimes, and it causes some problems in spring ball. But you want that on your team. So then when the defense is doing its regular season and we're going against somebody else, they like seeing it. So so we want our guys to be physical, and we want them to go out and dominate the offensive line and the line of scrimmage and get things rolling.
All right, so let's switch over to your defense. Against Birdville, 5 sacks, those were a part of the 8.5 tackles for loss that your group registered. The swarming part seems to be coming together. Birdville just a little bit less than 250 yards. Again, a little more than 100 yards last week for Brewer. What'd you see there? What'd you like?
I mean, it's been the same thing, every week. We see our defensive line getting a lot of pressure. We're not having to bring a whole lot of linebacker pressures to get pressure on the quarterback, which that's a big thing. And when we brought the two guys, the two ends that here today that you're going to talk to, and those guys are putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback, early on. So, I love the way our defense has played. We're not giving up the big plays, which has been a problem for us in the past. So, it's been a great thing to see, early on. And we just expect those guys as the year gets on to be better and better. And, they're already pretty good right now. Mm-hmm. So, they get better and better. They're going to be a scary defense.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because obviously we're going to be talking to Cooper and Carson here in our second segment. But when you have two effective defensive ends, what is the key to making that relationship work? Because it's kind of like a communication with those two. This is nothing against the tackles, of course, with Decker or Timon, but when you have those two that are kind of looking at each other and are that physical and have that first step, what does that mean, though, for a front's effectiveness?
I mean, it makes our front very effective. It makes it very difficult on people to throw the football as well as run the football. And one of the things that we've always been really good at is run defense, and sometimes we've had issues with getting pressure with our front four. We don't have that problem right now. We're getting the pressure with our front four. We're getting pushed inside with the D tackles, and then our two ends are collapsing the pocket. And so, it's going to make it very difficult on offenses to move the football on us consistently.
Yeah, it was kind of like last week in a couple of plays where Cooper and Carson kind of like, I'll meet you at the quarterback, where they both closed in on Zach Wells, the unfortunate recipient of that. That's the Birdville quarterback. But that's just kind of that thing. If you can kind of compress the pocket quickly, it changes the timing of what that opposing offense wants to do.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point is get those guys geared up and let them pin their ears back and go get after the quarterback, and and we got two really good ones, and then the two guys behind them. Brody and Jacob McIntyre are pretty good defensive ends as well. So we've got four guys that can go get after the defense of the quarterback from the defensive end, and then we also have talked about the four defensive tackles as well.
Sure, and the thing that those four have with Brody and Jacob, and of course with Carson and Cooper, is the fact they got length. You got 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 6'2", something like that, across those four. So if they're not able to get to the quarterback per se, they can get their hands up, and then they can create screens, or they can shorten the windows, or they can shrink the windows.
Yeah, exactly. They can get in those windows. They can make things difficult on him without getting pressure on him. Getting those hands up in his face and things like that. And then, they're also really good athletes.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, they're probably run better than a lot of defensive ends that you're going to see.
Not to compare. I will never ask a head coach to compare any player on his current roster to anybody else. But I will ask you who you think each of these guys, Cooper and Carson, who they remind you of.
Oh, man, that's tough. Dempsey's always kind of reminded me a little bit of Colt Ellison. He's not quite where Colt ended up yet. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
We hope that he does get there. We'll put a little pressure on him right there to try and become better than Colt Ellison. And then Cooper, kind of reminds me of, if you remember back to 2009, Cy Wilson.
Yes.
And the things that Cy Wilson can do off the edge. So. Those are two pretty good defensive ends that I'm comparing these guys to, which means we got two pretty good ones.
Yeah, and the good thing about it is that you're going to have them for for the remainder of this year, and then of course next year, because they're both juniors, and so it's every rep that you get from those two is going to be important. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this coming Thursday's district game against Keller Fossil Ridge. The Panthers are 1-3. They're 1-1 in District 3 5A. They won at Granbury last Friday, 31-16. That was a game where they jumped out to a 17-0 lead. The Pirates closed to 17-16, and then they were able to put it away in the fourth quarter. They're coached by Derek Ramsey. Pretty young team that Derek's got over there, but they look like they do have some athletes, and they will spread the football to a lot of different faces.
Yeah, they do. They play a lot of people. That's one of the things that I picked up on, just trying to get their starters and their backups and all that, is they play a lot of people. They do have one of their receivers, number 18. He's pretty good. That's the guy that they go to. They throw the ball to 18. I can't remember his name right now. Just 18 is the guy. And then in the run game, they've kind of had the most success when they're running their quarterback. So the quarterback running the football, and then throwing the ball to 18, are two of the big things that I noticed from them. And then I've known Derek Ramsey for a long time. He was the defensive coordinator at Denton Guyer when we were playing Denton Guyer in the playoffs and playing them several different times, So we know Derek really well. We know his defensive scheme. We've had to game plan against him several different times. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned their quarterback, Malachi Lockhart, I believe it is. Not the best passer. He's a little less than 50% in his completions, but his athleticism has got it because he is that dual threat. You kind of have to respect both of what his ability is in those areas.
Oh, yeah, you do. I mean, he can throw the ball, It's not like he can't, but running the football is one of the biggest things that's helped their offense, especially last week against Granbury. He had a couple of really long runs against them. And then, in the passing game, he gets the ball to 18. And then really, when I was breaking down their offense and trying to see what their top pass plays were, one of their top pass plays is what we call buzz, which is a slip screen to the tailback. So they do a lot of slip screens to the tailback as well. And
you all, though, have done a really good job taking the screen game away from a lot of teams, even with your two quarterbacks that you faced, with Carter Jones over at Nevada, at Lancaster, who's committed to Nevada. And, of course, in the opener, Kevin Sperry, Guyer at Oklahoma. That screen game, though, did not have a chance to really get off the ground the way those two programs wanted to.
Yeah, and that goes to our coaching. Our coaches do a great job of working with our defensive line and recognizing when someone is letting you go and finding who he's throwing the ball to. So our D-line does a really good job of recognizing screens, and then they're coached up to with whatever scheme it is that the opposing team has, they know where that ball's going.
Sure.
So a lot of times you'll see, we'll have two defensive linemen right by that guy that he's trying to throw it to.
And in addition to Malachi Lockhart, their quarterback, Draylon Galloway, probably one of their top running backs. But the one thing that I found about all of their running backs, or just a comprehensive look, their running game is averaging nearly 5 yards per carry. So they do have an idea of how they want to establish their running game week in and week out.
Yeah, they do a really good job. They run a lot of zone schemes just like we do. So, similar schemes. So, that's something our defensive guys are going to be accustomed to because they see it all spring and do a really good job against it in the spring. So, we expect for our defense to hold up a little bit better than what they've seen. They did play a really good Denton Ryan team. So we got a lot of video, to see how they did against that defensive front, which is a really good front as well.
And then defensively, because you just mentioned the fact that Derek Ramsey, their head coach, is a defensive coach by trade. You saw him when he was coaching at Guyer previously. What do you just give those listeners an idea of what to expect from the Fossil Ridge defense?
They're going to run up in a 4-2-5, which is kind of a Gary Patterson type style of defense. And they don't just sit there in it. They're going to move their defensive line quite a bit. They do a lot of twist with their defensive tackles and ends. But, it's going to be real similar to some of the things that we do defensively at Aledo. They play a lot of quarters back behind it. And, there's some things that, I talked with our offensive staff on Sunday. I said, all right, look, we've played against this guy for all these different times. And I said, and these things right here have theoretically worked, or typically work, each year. And so they are, putting those into the game plan and, some things that we haven't done as much this year as we've done in the past, and they've added it to the game plan this week.
Final question for you as you all prepare to play on Thursday. Short week, of course, a less day of practicing and preparing for this. And so there's good and bad. The good is that you have an extra day to prepare because next week is Denton Ryan. And if you do what you're expected to do on Thursday, then you have that extra day to prepare. And we should tell people, too, by the way, that Ryan's also playing on Thursday night. They're playing up at the Collins Complex against Granbury. So both Aledo and Ryan will have the same schedule getting ready for the December 4th game over at Aledo. Or, October 4th game over at Aledo. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself on that. But anyway, when you have that and that extra day, how much do you have to compress into your schedule? But even though you've been through this Thursday game, procedure before.
Yeah, I mean, we just basically take one of our preparation days out. So, and we harped on it with the kids this morning is we can't have a bad practice. We can't have a bad Monday because a bad Monday means we're one day behind, and we're already behind. So we expect, and we did have a pretty good practice this morning. It was raining, so we started out the practice in the indoor, but by about mid-practice, the rain had gone away, and it looked like there was no more rain coming to us, so we went outside midway through practice. So that was good to get out there and be able to throw the ball deeper down the field than we're allowed to in our indoor. But we got to have a good practice again tomorrow. And we've talked to the guys about that. And we're not looking at Denton Ryan right now. We are focused in on Fossil Ridge and making sure we're ready for Fossil Ridge, and we only have really 2.5 days to prepare for them.
And I will tell everyone this too, living in this area for as long as I have, and as far as where Keller is concerned and where that stadium is located, the Keller ISD Athletic Complex, it's on the campus of Keller High School. But in my early reporting days up in the Star-Telegram's Northeast office, I always said, and I think it rings true today, there's no easy way to get to Keller. So if you're going to leave, you better allow yourself a lot of time when you make the drive up there. So I don't know, what time do you all plan on leaving on Thursday for that?
We're leaving a little bit before 4. Now, they don't allow us to come into the stadium before 4:30. 4:30 is the earliest we can get there. So we're trying to get there as close to 4:30 as we can. The map says it takes about 50 minutes to get there, so we're planning on that being a little bit more than 50 minutes. So,
yeah.
But yeah, and we've played Fossil Ridge a couple of times in the past. Both of them were big playoff games.
Yep.
We played them actually at Collins in Denton the first time, and then the second time I think we played them over in Mansfield.
Right, at Newsom, their new stadium down there. Yep.
So those were, that was back,
that was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think, 06 and 07.
06, 07, yeah.
Yeah, and so those are actually my first 2 years covering you guys was 2006, 2007 on that. And the difference about those two sidelines and those two buildings is that Collins had the really tight sidelines and Mansfield's was a little bit more generous. Now, Keller, of course, it's pretty wide open too, so you'll have plenty of room to run around your sideline and kind of be organized. You won't feel like the walls are falling in on you or anything like that. So, Coach, we always appreciate the time. We'll look forward to it. Again, see you on Thursday over in Keller. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
All right. And we want to remind you, too, that this podcast is brought to you by our friends at H5 Sports Barn. H5 Sports Barn and Knife Physio and Performance can help unlock your athletic potential and elevate your game like the Aledo Bearcats. With expert sports physical therapy, tailored recovery plans, and top-notch sports performance training, H5 Sports Barn, proud supporters of the Aledo Bearcats. And we're also brought to you by Hiley Mazda. Looking for a new ride? Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth has you covered. Right now, get $3,500 off MSRP or 0% interest for 36 months on the 5-star safety rated CX5 and CX30. Hurry in, these offers won't last long. Experience top-notch service and unbeatable deals in their new state-of-the-art facility in Fort Worth. Or check out their extensive Mazda lineup at HileyMazdaofFortWorth.com. Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth, family-owned and operated for 30 years. On the other side of this break, we will have the bookend defensive ends, Carson Dempsey and Cooper Cyphers, joining us here, and we'll also get you an update as to how Aledo's alums in the football world are doing. Stick around. The podcast continues after this timeout. Wells to throw, pressure, and he will hit, and the ball is out. The Bearcats have it. This is McElree at the 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Aledo Bearcats. And that was the Bearcats' first defensive touchdown of the year. They've actually scored 11 points this year, courtesy of safeties in back-to-back games. Welcome back to the Aledo Coaches Show podcast here on 92.1 Hank FM. I'm Kevin Lonnquist. Our second segment is going to be started off with our Aledo alumni report, and then we'll be joined by Cooper Cyphers and Carson Dempsey, the bookend defensive ends. But let's get you caught up on the Aledo alumni report. We'll start off with Jaden Allen, who was the defensive back on the state championship team last year. Of course, he signed with Arkansas. Not the best news that he was looking for, but again, he'll have his full career ahead of him. Back in the summer, Arkansas head coach Sam Pittman announced that Allen will have or had knee cartilage surgery, will not play this fall. But again, not a terrible thing for Jaden, just has to get a little bit more strength in the strength and conditioning program, get into a rehab program there, and then he should be good to go for spring ball in 2025. And then Jake Gillespie, who was also a member of that secondary in 2023, a safety on that squad. He's at Stephen F. Austin and has appeared in 2 of the Lumberjacks' first 4 games, so getting a little burn to get his season underway. So that is a look at our Aledo alumni report here. Again, Jaden Allen and Jake Gillespie on our on our report this week. Okay, we're joined now by Cooper Cyphers and Carson Dempsey, the bookend defensive ends. And I say bookend because if you've got 2 really good defensive ends on your defensive front, that means that they're going to open and shut the case, so to speak, or open and shut the book, if you will, and that sort of thing. And so you guys have gotten off to this good start, I mean, back-to-back shutouts. Let's just start with the overall question of how you feel like things have gone to this point of the season, and where do things go from here? We'll start off with you on this, Cooper.
I feel like things have started off great. I mean, we've been blowing out teams, and I mean, it started off a little bit like rocky, but other than that, we picked it up and we started 0.
Yep. And then for you, Carson, what do you think?
Yeah, I think our team, we have really good team chemistry on our defensive line, so I think we play together really well, and we can only go up from here, so I think we'll have pretty good luck this season.
You know, the one thing that we were talking about this in the Lancaster game, but I wonder, before I get into that, the one thing that I thought about was how well you all push the pocket against Denton Guyer. That's a 6A team, and you guys have played them year after year, but the way you guys really own that line of scrimmage, what did that say to you about what you all were capable of? I'll start with you on that, Carson.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very talented defensive line group, and we're very good at keeping the quarterback in the pocket and not letting them roll out and put a lot of pressure. That way our DBs don't have to cover someone for 3 to 5 seconds.
Yeah, and that's important this year because this is a new secondary. And, Cooper, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. What did that – because you're the newbie, per se, on this front. So the way that you guys were able to dominate against Guyer, even though it didn't go the way that everybody wanted it to go, but what did that kind of tell you or reinforce with you with the things that you were building leading up to that season opener?
It just gave me the confidence that I needed to go on with the rest of the season. Just know that I can get it done, we can get it done.
And here's the interesting stat. I don't know if any of you all had heard this in our broadcast against Lancaster. Your front 4, you 4 of you guys average about 246 across the front. The game against Lancaster, their offensive line, of course, this is 5-on-4, so that's kind of adding into the numbers here because it's left guard, left tackle, or left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. Okay. They were averaging about 315 pounds across that front 5. So that's a 69-pound difference between the 2 fronts there. And the fact that you guys were able to still establish that, what do you get out of a game like that when you are facing that kind of a size, quote-unquote, mismatch, but your physicality and your strength seem to be the difference maker for why you guys could still control that line of scrimmage against Lancaster? Why don't you talk about that, Carson?
Yeah, I think speed has a big factor into that. Those big guys, they can't move as well as us whenever we're lighter, so we can a lot of speed to bull moves and just physicality. Physicality has a big factor into it. The most physical person's going to win. So,
in your impression of that, though, Cooper, it's one thing to see it on film as you're preparing to play Lancaster, but then when you go against it, what did you pick up on immediately saying, oh, I've got the advantage here if I do this, this, and this? What did you see?
Yeah, at first I started trying to, get around him, but then I realized, he wasn't as strong, so I just started hitting him and bull rushing him every play.
And just kind of pushing back and that sort of thing. Okay. So I want to ask you both about the communication that you two have had because, obviously what Decker Sanders and what Timon Meeks does in the middle is essential to that because the A-gaps are always going to be where football is going to be won or lost. But the communication that you two have moving together, what's the thing that you two have to kind of look at each other, even if it's on a hand signal or maybe it's like a wink or something like that, to understand how each is going to move toward the pocket? What's the thing that you guys rely on the most? I'll start with you on this, Cooper.
Just trusting that he'll get it done. He'll make the play. I trust him. I trust the middle guys, and I trust Carson.
And then is there anything, though, that you guys will look at each other like, even though you guys don't huddle up per se, but is there anything you guys will kind of, communicate to each other before you line up for their next offensive snap?
yeah, I think if they're pass setting us a certain way or they're doing something that's tricky that we haven't seen on film, and we'll tell each other as you're doing this, as you're doing that, and we'll fix it. We'll tell each other, but Yeah, I think that's our communication as far as if they're doing something tricky that we can't figure out.
Now, I want to assure everybody that there's no jealousy here, but the one thing, as we've noticed here in the first 4 games, is that more people are running to the newbie over here on this side, where a lot of plays are coming to your side, and Carson's getting left out of this. I mean, you've noticed, and we were talking before we started recording this, where you've noticed that a lot of teams are starting to run away from it. That's a sign of respect, because they know what impact that you've made, what you did last year. And so what's the adjustment that you've kind of had to make to understand that? Because the fact that how you essentially, it's kind of like one of those dominant cornerbacks that can take away one side of the field. Well, you've kind of done that where you're taking one side of the offensive line or the line of scrimmage away from that. What's been your adjustment to something like that, or what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to you can't make them run the ball towards you, so you got to have great technique. You got to just trust your other guy. I trust him 100%. He'll make the play on the other side. So great technique, be physical with my guy, and that's all. I just got to play hard.
Let's ask you two guys about this, because this defensive front was going to be one of the calling cards for this defense and for this team in 2024. But the addition of Timon Makes the move in from All Saints, what has he meant to this front? I'll start with you on this, Cooper.
Oh, it's great having him in there, just because whenever me and Carson are coming up the field, the quarterback's going to step up, and having him, we know they're going to make the play and he's going to make it.
And then, does he allow you, Carson, for you guys to maybe pin your ears back a little bit more, that you can just kind of be a little bit more free and just in chase, if you will? That's probably not the right word, but in order to gives you the freedom that you can be a little bit more aggressive, I guess is what I'm asking, in terms of just pursuing the running back, or because he can because you trust him to take that A gap a little bit along with Decker.
Yeah, they're tremendously good inside. They clog all that stuff up in there, and Timon's a super explosive player. He's very fast off the ball, and he makes a lot of plays up front for us.
A few years ahead of your time, I was telling Coach Jones this as I went to the inter-squad scrimmage back in August, that he reminded me of big James Williams, a little taller than James, but James was a 4-year starter for this team back in the day, and it was such an impact on that. And there's something about a nose tackle that can really just set up the whole front the way in terms of how creative or how exotic its fronts or its push or whatever you guys can do with that. Do you agree with that, or how?
100%. Yeah, I mean, if you can have 2 dudes, or you need 2 dudes that can just if they can stop the A gaps, and that can really take control of an offense and really stop them.
What has his impact meant for you in terms of just your adjustment and getting more comfortable snap after snap, game after game?
Just knowing I can trust the inside, so I don't have to be going inside or anything. I can stay in my responsibility and stay outside.
So a couple of numbers for this defense. So far through the first 4 games, 9 sacks. They had 5 against Birdville last week. They've generated 19 quarterback hurries. 12 of those came in the opener against Geyer. I want you to tell me the value, and I'm going to ask you guys a little bit about those 2 statistical categories right there, the sack and the hurry. To what extent do you put value, or what do you look at more? What brings you more value? Obviously, the sack has a lot of personal thing because you get to bring the guy down, the quarterback down. But do you find that to be of equal importance on the hurry because you're still disrupting the play, or how do you value each one against the other? I'll start with you on this, Cooper.
Yeah, hurry's just as good as the sack because, we're rushing him out. He's going to throw a bad ball, and we're going to get a pick. Maybe take it to the house. And then what about for you?
Yeah, I'd add on to that. If you're hurrying the quarterback, he can't get the ball out to where he wants to be. And, on a sack, they're going to lose a couple yards, but I'd take no gain any day of the week. So.
All right, so the difference thing, as we've talked about earlier, is the fact that this is a new starting secondary for this group. And so did you all kind of feel letting those guys, that if they were going to get their feet, find their feet, get into the flow of the season, did you feel like there was more of an onus on the 4 of you to kind of start quickly, or did you feel like you had to kind of set a tone early so those guys could settle in? I'll start with you on this, even though you're the newbie and you were kind of finding your way on this, Cooper, but just talk about that a little bit.
At first I did, but after it started going, they're doing great. So after it started, I was like, all right, we're good.
All right, and then for you, what was kind of talking about just with that front as you guys were going through spring, and then obviously when fall camp started in August, and just going through that and just saying, what can we do to kind of help those guys settle in?
Yeah, I knew coming out, graduating all 4 of our secondary people, we're going to have to really put pressure on the quarterback and make him. We can't have him have 5 seconds to throw the football. So I think we've done a really good job of that, and the secondary's done a great job too. they have not let up very many big plays, so they've done a really good job this year.
Exactly. Last week's guest, Adrian Fuller, has two interceptions, and of course, Kai Taylor's done a great job back there as well. Let's talk a little bit about getting ready for Keller Fossil Ridge on Thursday night. Why don't you take us through, of course, you heard what Coach Jones had to say, but just when you looked at them on film, their athleticism, their ability to run the football, what stands out to you? I'll start with you on this, Carson.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a pretty good football team. They like to run the football. They like to run with their quarterback. They have a receiver that's pretty solid. So, I mean, they got some weapons, and I think it'll be a good one.
And then for you, Cooper, what did you see?
Yes, sir. Just watching my tackle and lean. I've been watching his weak side, and then I think it's going to be speed, like getting around him and stuff. But because I've watched people try to bull rush when he just catches them. So.
And really, this is going to be the first with Malachi. With Malachi Lockhart, their starting quarterback, this is probably going to be like the first dual type of threat quarterback you're going to get because you've had more pocket passers. Obviously, Zach Wells last week against Birdville, they were going to the dink and dunk, and then they would kind of do a little bit of zone RPO stuff with him, and then he would take off and run with it. But it seems like Malachi's more of that natural. He's going to run a lot more. And so what's the challenge that he presents on this? I'll start with you on this, Cooper.
Because he's going to get out of the pocket. He's going to try to escape and try to get the pass off. So we got to not only do a better job not getting too far upfield, it's just got to be like even because we get too close, he's going to roll out. We get too up, he's going to go inside.
Okay, and then for you, just what is the challenge that he presents just because the fact that he's a little shifty back there?
Yeah, I think we need on our pass rush. We don't need to let him get outside of us because there's no one out there. So just be careful on our pass rush, and I think a power move would work really well on that, and just try and contain him for those so he doesn't get those extra yards.
Okay, and then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about recruiting here. For Cooper, this is a little bit new. You're getting some early discussions with some coaching staffs here, and Carson, you've got a few offers. Why don't you just update everybody where you're at offer-wise and schools that you're talking with? Just update us on that.
Yeah, so I have an offer from Pitt, UTSA, Louisiana Tech, and South Florida right now.
Okay.
I've been talking to Baylor, Wisconsin, a couple of other schools like that.
Have you had a chance to go to any schools on Saturday to go watch games or anything like that?
I did. So I went to Texas. I forgot that. I went to Texas A&M last Saturday, I think it was.
Was it bowling? Was it the Bowling Green game or?
It was not. It might have been 2 Saturdays ago. It was the McNeese State game.
Okay, yeah. So that was 2 weeks ago. Okay,
Okay,
got you on that. All right. And then Cooper, you said that you've had no offers yet for you, but you've had some discussions with UTSA. But I'm sure you've talked to enough guys who have gone through the recruiting process of just kind of understanding what it is that you have to evaluate. What's that been like for you, just getting into this and understanding what the process is like and just talking to coaches and make sure that you're not drinking out of a fire hose with this kind of process?
Yes, sir. I've been talking to a couple schools, but with breaking my hand last year, I didn't really I missed 7 games, so I didn't really get to put that film out there. So this year I've really just been focused on getting that film out so I can actually start getting to more schools.
Yeah, and and you bring up a good point too that I want to play off of that. So are you guys at a point where you have your films ready through the first 4 games, or do you want to tack on a few more games before you start sending it out to coaches because recruits are doing this across the country right now, that they're sending out their first 3 games, first 5 games, whatever, while the season is going. What is your process with that, Carson?
Yeah, so I send out my film after every game just to the coaches that I've been in contact with and just the schools that I'm talking to. But then I probably every 5 games I'll put a little highlight reel together and post it. That way everyone can see it.
Okay, and then for you, Cooper, what's been your plan of attack on this?
Yeah, same thing, just sending out every game. And in my first 3 games, I made all three highlights, just like the main highlights. And then I'll probably do it the first 5 games.
Okay. I want to ask you both, too, because you can't go through this recruiting process alone. You've got to have great support from your coaching staff and, of course, from your families here. What's that meant to you to understand and just try to keep things in perspective and not try and let this process be bigger than what it is? What's it been like for you on this, Cooper?
Yeah, Ray and his dad have been helping me out a little bit. Have been
Ray Guillory?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ray Guillory and his dad. They've been sending it out for me. And just like to not like get, what's the word? Discouraged about it. Just keep putting out film and just keep doing it.
Yeah, and then for you, Carson, what's been big for just your family and then, of course, the Aledo coaching staff helping you get through this?
Yeah, Coach Jones, he's had some pretty big schools that have came through and looked at a couple dudes like Finley and Ray, and he'll pull me aside and I'll talk to him and I'll get their information and we talk. So I appreciate that. And then my mom, she takes me on my visits and stuff like that, so I really appreciate that.
Got to pay her back on all the gas mileage at all
right.
the gas stations that she's going to pay for all those trips,
Right.
And so, but is there anything, I mean, you don't want to play any favorites, but when you get these offers, it's a great feeling. And so, but how do you kind of keep it in perspective, knowing that the long way to go, and it would be tempting to maybe want to commit, I got an offer, but what's been kind of like, how do I just breathe and just kind of take that in and realize that there's a long way to go before I figure out this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think I have a whole nother year of football after this year, so I have a while until I can make my final decision. I think I'll get some more schools that are going to offer me as well. So I just want to keep that open and see where it takes me.
Is it exciting or is it stressful? I'll start with you on this, Cooper.
It's kind of stressful, like not having nothing yet. So it's all in the head. Just gotta keep working.
And then for you, because you do have several offers, so what's it like for you, just kind of keeping it dealing with the stress and just kind of keeping things in perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting. It's exciting to get your first one's awesome. It makes you feel really good. Your hard work's paid off, but it's kind of a snowball effect. You want to keep that thing going, and that way you have a good amount of options you can pick from.
Yeah, and just one thing that I've learned, because I did recruiting for 27 years, was I always would tell recruits this, is just remember that you're recruiting the school as much as the school is recruiting you. It's a two-way street, so you got to figure out, is this where I want to be for my next 4 or 5 years, and is this going to be the right environment for me? And so you've got to do a lot of homework on each of those schools. You already are finding that out right now, and you're starting to understand that as well. Guys, I couldn't be happier to have you with us here. To my immediate left is Carson Dempsey. To my far left is Cooper Cyphers. Let's give it up for them for being with us today. And we want to remind you that the Aledo podcast is brought to you by our two sponsors, H5 Sports Barn. H5 Sports Barn and Knife Physio and Performance can help unlock your athletic potential and elevate your game like the Aledo Bearcats. With expert sports physical therapy, tailored recovery plans, and top-notch sports performance training, H5 Sports Barn, proud supporters of the Aledo Bearcats. And also by Hiley Mazda. Looking for a new ride? Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth has you covered. Right now, get $3,500 off MSRP or 0% interest for 36 months on the 5-star safety-rated CX-5 and CX-30. Hurry in, these offers won't last long. Experience top-notch service and unbeatable deals in their new state-of-the-art facility in Fort Worth, or check out the extensive Mazda lineup at HileyMazdaofFortWorth.com. Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth, family-owned and operated for more than 30 years. Don't forget the Bearcats will be playing this coming Thursday night at the Keller ISD Athletic Complex against the Fossil Ridge Panthers. 6:30 is the pregame show here on 92.1 Hank FM with Kyle Hicks, Mercedes Meyer, the Deacon, and yours truly. We'll have the kickoff for you at 7 o'clock. The Bearcats trying to get to 4-1 on the season, 3-0 in district play, and trying to advance that national district winning streak. Everyone's tired of talking about it, but trying to get that to number 122. And then we will be back next week, this coming Monday, September the 30th, as we look forward to the Bearcats getting ready to play Denton Ryan on October 4th. I'm Kevin Lonnquist. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all next week. Good night.
Thanks for listening to the Aledo Coaches Show podcast, brought to you by H5 Sports Barn in Aledo and Hiley Mazda of Fort Worth, with Bearcats head coach Robby Jones and the voice of the Bearcats, Kevin Lonnquist. Please like and subscribe to this podcast and tell a friend. You're also welcome to join us every Monday night at 7 from Blue Rays of New Orleans in Hudson Oaks. And then listen to every Aledo Bearcats game, home and away, live on Real Country 92.1 Hank FM, on the free 92.1 Hank FM app, or online at 921hankfm.com.